Happy January 6th. I hope you guys are well. I had a power outage today and threw off my entire schedule, but it's back now, and I'd like to try to get something up for you all. So it's good to be back with everyone. Thank you for tuning in last night. And before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about everyone's favorite holiday, January 6th, and tie it to how we ended last night's episode. We talked about Scott Adams and his great phrase that we're all a country basically watching two movies on one screen, and I have no better actual representation of that in the real world than on January 6th of all days. I was in New York still, and we were living in our house with my grandma, who had leukemia, and she was spending her final days with my family. And she had a TV in her part of the house. There's a little addition she was living in. As you've heard me say repeatedly, we've never had a TV, but my grandma did. And as January 6th was unfolding, I was watching the news with her, and we were watching two movies on one screen. She was 84, 85 at that point, and she would pass away later in the next year, in the fall of, or actually in the spring of the following year. But we were watching the live news reports on like NBC or something, CBS, and what she saw was an invasion. And now she wasn't a Democrat. She didn't really consider herself one way or the other. She voted both ways throughout her entire life, as did my grandfather. So they weren't hyper partisan, but they were only ever watching the mainstream news. You know, when they got their first television, they just had Walter Cronkite and just got their news from one source. And then she inherited this world that we all have now that had multiple news sources, but she got her multiple news sources only from the TV, from the main channels, and from the newspapers. Whereas I was getting it from all those things, but also from the internet, and in a more rapid pace than she was used to. So when I was seeing J6 unfold, I was wondering how many feds were there. Were people actually dressed up as MAGA and doing these things in MAGA's name? So I just remember standing there and being like, this is not what you think it is. And she's sitting there next to me being like, this is, really, really bad. This is an invasion. This is an insurrection. She wasn't using that word, but, and by the next day, we were seeing people, I believe his name was Jeremiah Sullivan. Could be wrong with the name. So sorry if anyone out there is Jeremiah Sullivan and this is not the proper name, but there was a gentleman, we'll say a young man, who was able to sell footage of himself in the Capitol on January 6th. He was selling that footage to places like CNN for lots of money. And they thought he was just a reporter, just who was there reporting on the things. And it turns out he was actually Antifa to some degree. If not Antifa, he was certainly some sort of accelerationist, because it would come out that there was footage of him inciting some sort of riot within the Capitol. I think he had a knife on him. He pulled that out, and he was kind of instructing people, enticing people to go do bad things within the Capitol, which confirmed my thoughts that I had while watching it, that there were aggressors within it that were probably trying to take advantage of the situation to make Trump and his base look bad, which is, the other thing I was thinking while it was taking place was, who benefits the most from this? Because it's not MAGA and it's not Trump. It's the people who are going to use it against Trump and against MAGA. It's the people who had turned Trump and his voters into such a caricature that anything bad happening would be easily turned into these caricatures, this confirmation of the caricature, these boogeymen. So there's just such an interesting example of how, depending on your news diet, your information diet, and watching things unfold in real time with someone else who has a very different news diet, how you can interpret these situations vastly differently as they're unfolding. And I will say, to my grandma's credit, she really did start waking up to the evils of like lockdowns in particular. She never cared for the mask. She only did it when she had to go get her blood transfusions because they made her wear one. She thought they were silly. But she didn't like the vaccine passport thing. And that really woke her up to this being a cruel and unusual dystopia that we were now inheriting thanks to COVID, thanks to Fauci, and in part thanks to Trump. But and Cuomo for us in New York, who was touting these vaccine passports that were done by IBM, which, funny enough, IBM did help the Nazis at some point. You can go check out that computer or that book about that computer online, which is super interesting. They always got to use the technology to cull us, and we'll get into a little bit of that later on in terms of technology and evil, my favorite topic. But yeah, happy January 6th, everybody. And where were you on that fateful day? After I watched the news go down, I really wasn't that concerned about anything. I didn't think anything was going to happen. But I had actually called it happening a night or two before. I had a podcast that is now completely gone from the internet. It was a lot of fun with a friend of mine who was in Georgia. We never met in person, but we started a podcast. It was my first podcast. We started it during lockdowns. We kind of just started talking through Instagram, and it was a great time. Very cathartic. At that point, never considered doing a podcast until I talked to him, and we did it for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. It's all just, I tried looking for it not too long ago. It's completely gone. Probably because the subscriptions ran up, and it was never on YouTube. It was on like Spotify. It was Ready Slow was the name of it, and maybe some of you remember that. I know there's some of you here that have followed me since those early days, but on an episode of that podcast before January 6th, I said something's going to happen, and it probably won't be Trump's people doing it, but they will frame it to make it look like it was. And what's happened since is there's been news, declassified documents that came out saying that there were hundreds of feds at January 6th that day. Now, they'll say they were there in a capacity to maybe help. Perhaps they were like medical assistants. Do you guys believe that at all? Do you believe that? I think they were there as aggressors. Very much like the Whitmer Fednapping. And we've done an episode on that with Radix Verum. I hope I'm getting her Twitter name right. But she's the one making the documentary about that for the past few years. And she's been working closely with a lot of the guys that were involved in that entrapment. And if you've seen that episode, if you've done any of your reading about that situation, you'll know that the feds will stop at nothing to turn these events into something very destructive that they can use against the population. The Whitmer Fednapping included plans written up by feds for kidnappings, for bombings, for death, helicopters, dark stuff. It will remind you of Operation Northwoods if you go through those files. Very similar, sacrificing of innocent lives to frame people to help push a certain narrative, which they certainly needed, and they certainly did with January 6th. And the way they punished anyone in the vicinity of January 6th is disgusting. And I am stoked that Trump pardoned every J6er. The one thing that I did have issue with is that they were talking about maybe not the non-violent ones. And I know that sounds crazy to say that I have an issue with that. However, after talking to many people who've been imprisoned or in trouble because of January 6th, there is a lot of cases. There are many cases where people were convinced or strong-armed to say that they were violent, that they were aggressive, and to help their case, even though they wound up getting imprisonment, put in prison as well. So a lot of the cases of quote-unquote violent people at January 6th weren't actually violent, but they were instructed forced to say so. And you see how that was used against the base at large and allowed the Biden administration to open up all these like dystopian Capitol Police hunting headquarters around the country so they could grab a grandma at a Walmart and throw her in jail. So insane. And on top of that, the other thing I've learned after doing a lot of interviews with people who were reporters, genuine reporters, and were at January 6th, was that they would go into the Capitol, they're filming, they have the microphone, they have the camera, they have press passes, and even had to go through trials, go to court, and in one of their cases, I believe his name is Stephen Horn, we've had him on IRL, the judge wouldn't even allow his long history of press passes to be shown in court as evidence of him being a reporter. I mean, how insane is that? And he had a long list of press passes he'd acquired and applied for over the years, and a history of being published and doing these things. But all those rules went out the window for this day, January 6th. Hard to believe it was 6 years ago. Unbelievable. So in thinking, before I get to the first topic of the day, I was also thinking about something I neglected to say yesterday, and those are two like stories. One which I know is true, and the other one which might just be apocryphal. I'm not sure. It's hard to find anything true about it, but I remember reading in a book a long time ago when I was writing something about Disney history. But the first thing is that I always find interesting about Disney World in Florida is that when Walt Disney and his brother Roy were in a plane flying over the Everglades in Florida to determine what land they wanted to use for Disney World, they wouldn't know until they landed that JFK had just been assassinated. So it's just such an interesting contrast in emotions and things that are happening where on the ground the president has been assassinated, and up top this guy who wants to make the most magical place on earth, this place for kids, is scouting out location and gobbling up a lot of the Everglades for Disney World. And that those things, he landed and found out about that. Crazy. And the other thing is, and this one is hard to verify with the internet. Maybe you can do a little more digging than I can. I tried briefly, but I remember it must have been, I read this in 2008 or 2009 in some book. I don't even remember the book. But I was writing like this history about the Hall of Presidents, which fascinates me and also haunts me. It's a very scary thing, these robot presidents. So this story has been with me for quite some time, almost 20 years, but I don't know if it's true anymore, but I'm going to say it anyway. I just want to let you know first. But the story goes that when they decided to do the Hall of Presidents, they put it all together. I don't know exactly when this was. It wasn't long after they created Disney World, but and it's in Florida, as far as I remember. They had, the main, we had Washington and Lincoln was there, and they invited Lincoln's ancestors to come look at it. And according to this story, Lincoln's robot had a major malfunction and blew a gasket somewhere over here, as far as I remember reading, and kind of started spewing out oil that the robot used to keep lubricated. And it just always struck me that if this is all true, if this story is true, and I'm not just making this up from some fever dream I had, that ancestors of Lincoln had to watch a mechanical recreation of their relative's assassination, but at this point in time, by way of machine. Just a ridiculous image to consider. At some point, I got to revisit that story. I never did anything with it, but Disney fascinates me. It's haunting. I'm not a big fan. I am a fan of Mary Poppins, and one day, people want to debate me on that, and I would love to have that debate. I think it's a story about an angel who can save a family and bring the family back together. Other people will say it's a story about a witch. So that's where the debate lies. But the remake, the part 2 of Mary Poppins that they put out like 8 years ago is trash. Somewhere on the internet, I did write a review of that movie. I think it's in the Los Angeles Review of Books. I tore that movie apart. I was very upset. But that's a story for another day. But anyway, I wanted to first get into something I saw drifting around Twitter. It's been drifting on Twitter, around on Twitter, for the past few weeks. And when I first saw it, I did look into it, and I did confirm a few of these things. And I was like, oh, wow, that is a crazy connection. But first, I'll start here. And I saw this through @ToxicTiramisu. And I'll just read from their tweets. And they posted this, I think it was yesterday. Project Often, OFTEN, was a CIA program launched in 1970 under Sidney Gottlieb, initially framed as research into psychic and paranormal phenomena. By 1972, it shifted to demonology, exploring Satanism for CIA use, including funding a university course in sorcery. So a few things before I continue. Sidney Gottlieb, that is basically the father of MK Ultra. I forget the Nazi's name that we hired through Paperclip, but it was him, the Nazi, that we hired through Paperclip, teaming up basically with Sidney Gottlieb, who was a Jew from Brooklyn. And they developed the idea of MK Ultra, what would become MK Ultra. Sidney Gottlieb, fun fact, born with a club foot. And interestingly enough, Alan Dulles, who was running the CIA at this time, was also born with a club foot. So bizarre. And Sidney, fascinating but terrifying character. If you have not read Poisoner in Chief, I highly recommend it. There was a new MK Ultra book that came out recently, and the author was on Rogan, and I did start reading it, but it feels like you're reading a SparkNotes version of Poisoner in Chief. And again, while you're reading Poisoner in Chief, if you read it, it's written by like a New York Times type author. So, it's good to look into things and research outside of just a book, and don't take everything in the book as fact, which you should do with anything. But knowing its source, it's always good to look into it. But it is a really well-sourced book, and you can look up things rather easily. And it's highly documented, a lot of these situations he wrote about concerning the birth of MK Ultra. And then, so the other thing here, before I read some of these quotes from a book that Toxic Tiramisu shared, is something I've talked about a lot when he's talking about funding a university course in sorcery. You might have heard me mention multiple times how the CIA worked directly with magicians, right? We read from it like a month ago. The CIA has a handbook from the 50s, I believe it was in the 50s, about illusions, how to create illusions. And that was brought about by their work with magicians. And one of those magicians was John Mulholland. And sorry, I'm hitting my microphone. Hopefully this works. Hopefully it makes it a little better. But John Mulholland was, they say, mentored by Houdini. If he wasn't mentored, it really depends on who you're looking at, who you're reading. At the very least, he was very, very close with Houdini. So Mulholland also, we know, was approached by the CIA because they're like, hey, we want to use some of your illusions while we're working on this MK Ultra program to help us create super soldiers, to help create these false realities. And Mulholland was also a part of the story of the gentleman who they say, the CIA says, either, this is their quote from back when it happened, he either jumped or fell out of his hotel room over the balcony and died. He was a CIA guy, and he was part of these early experiments, and he was dosed with LSD. And again, the LSD was made at the behest of the CIA. They asked Eli Lilly, the pharmaceutical company, to produce a copious amount of LSD, and they did. And they started testing it on in certain experiments, at like little parties with CIA agents in the surrounding DC areas, like in Maryland and Virginia. And this gentleman, whose name I am spacing on right now, I'm sure you guys will know immediately who I'm talking about, but after like a lot of terrible anxiety that seems to have been the consequence of being dosed with LSD, he fell out the window and died of a hotel room where he was with another CIA agent. And he was up in New York trying to get help for his anxiety, for his panic attacks, which seemed like they were stemming from LSD, like a prolonged bad trip that he couldn't shake. And when the CIA went to the house of the widow and the son, I believe there was at least one son, they told the family he either fell or jumped out of a window, which, you know, makes no sense. But it never left the son of that man what they said. And when news broke years later about Sidney Gottlieb and about MKUltra, the son kind of connected the dots and was like, whoa, my dad might have been involved in that. Like, that might have been what happened to my dad. And sure enough, it was. And that really broke open a lot of this stuff. And before I continue, a lot of this reporting, I'm just tying a lot of things in right now that we talked about last year. A lot of that reporting on MKUltra came out of the investigative reporting done by Cy Hirsch. You've heard me talk about Cy Hirsch, especially when I was talking about my problems with the Pentagon press pass, which I think is a ridiculous farce that makes people maybe feel more important than they are. And it's not really for people who want to be journalists. It's for people who want to just go along for the ride, sit in the Pentagon and feel like they're doing something, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But what that press pass does, it is negate investigative reporting like Cy Hirsch, who used his press pass from the Pentagon to really ingratiate himself within the Pentagon and with people within the Pentagon to uncover at first the My Lai massacre, which was the Vietnam massacre that was uncovered by him, where American soldiers went on a killing spree and killed innocent men, women, and children, to the point of having like mass shootings of children and also throwing children up in the air and catching them with their bayonets. So like really, really disturbing stuff happening right with that. It's like, I can't believe that's real. And there has, since that story broke, I believe that was maybe in the 70s, many soldiers came out and publicly spoke about it. So you don't just have to look at Cy Hirsch, whose politics I don't really agree with, but I do agree with his tenacity and his willingness to chase down a story. I mean, it's funny because we were talking about Cy Hirsch whenever the Pentagon stuff was happening with the press pass weeks ago. And since the Christmas break, Netflix actually released a documentary about Cy Hirsch, which I have not watched. I watched like 5 or 10 minutes, and it looks good, but I want to go back to it. But a lot of the stories that I saw within those first 5 or 10 minutes, you'd find on any Cy Hirsch interview on YouTube. And the things that are very notable to me are what he did to chase down that story. It's not just like talking to people at the Pentagon. It's going out, flying around the country and looking for people, like really actual journalism that we don't get a lot of these days. Things have changed, and I'm not knocking the people who are at home doing a lot of research, because that's also great. People doing that during COVID helped break the whole narrative down, probably save people's lives by doing that kind of thing. So that's great. And that's journalism that has evolved with the times, with our technology. But there's also a lot of people who just play it safe and just kind of like get their canned quotes from their officials and put it out there, which serves its purpose. But again, what's going on at the Pentagon now does not allow for a Cy Hirsch situation. Cy Hirsch also broke open a lot of the MKUltra stuff. It's bananas, and recommend going and looking at those old articles about MKUltra, COINTELPRO, the My Lai massacre. Really, it's crazy that this man is still alive. He must be in his late 80s now, early 90s, still sharp. So that's all that. Before I get into this, these are quotes now that Toxic Tiramisu put out from a book, and he doesn't say which book, unfortunately, but I believe, I just want to look before I say it. I believe this is from Michael Aquino's book, Psyops, which you'll remember we talked about him as well weeks ago, because he was the guy with the crazy eyebrows, crazier than mine, like the ones that were like Hook, Captain Hook's eyebrows, kind of twisted up at the ends. And he was a man in the military, but he was also the founder of the Temple of Set. He was a Satanist, open Satanist. And he wrote this book that I'm going to read from now. But he also got in he didn't get in any trouble. He was investigated for helping to run a daycare that there was suspected child abuse at. So that whole story is insane. Anyway, let me look at this. Here we go. Often was a CIA operation that started in 1970 when Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the former chief of the agency's Technical Services Branch, took over the agency's new Office of Research and Development. Operation Often was the ORD's first project, with a $150,000 grant authorized by the then CIA director, Richard Helms. Participants in the project back work that was based on Dr. Ewan Cameron's earlier research into the supernatural. Operation Often's mission, according to Dr. Gottlieb, was to harness, this is a quote now, harness the forces of darkness and challenge the concept that the inner reaches of the mind are beyond reach. The project will aim to create a new kind of psycho-civilized human being. Again, the project will aim to create a new kind of psycho-civilized human being. That sentence might not surprise you guys who've read into MKUltra, but worth repeating. In their quest to construct the new psycho-civilized human being, Operation Often participants began by visiting palmistry parlors, the booths of fairground fortune tellers, and in the larger cities, the well-appointed offices of the psychics who served the rich and powerful. End quote. The Operation Often staff introduced themselves to these New Age practitioners as researchers with the Scientific Engineering Institute, a cover selected by Dr. Gottlieb. Working under this cover, Operation Often, participants were able to convince many clairvoyants to become consultants for an educational research program that was carried out at a CIA safe house in Washington. And that is according to author Gordon Thomas. This passage is great because I'm skipping some parts. What I'm skipping is every other sentence has the source material for you to then go look it up into another book or document. That's good stuff. So that also, just to remind you, like when the CIA is doing these things, it's happening now and it was happening then, they hide their experiments under so many layers that it's almost impossible to find out where this is emitting from. What is the source of this? Like when you hear like the CIA safe house in Washington, you might remember then the CIA safe houses from MKUltra that happened in California for Operation Midnight Climax, when they were like, we want to start dosing unknown people, unbeknownst to the people, dosing them with LSD. So we're going to get a safe house, we're going to hire hookers, and we're going to have the hookers bring the men, the Johns, into the safe house. They're going to leave the room, the hookers, and then the men will be alone, and then the CIA will pump aerosolized LSD into the room to observe the effects of LSD.
Yeah.
Okay, another quote. Within its walls, it became a common sight to see long bearded men or gypsy-garbed women talking earnestly to preppy gray-suited CIA behaviorists about how to identify and interpret lifelines and interpret the different bumps on a person's head. I do have two on my head, weird, misshapen. I think that's a consequence of growing up on a landfill that like oozed red in rainstorms, but that's a story for another day. Operation Often also turned to astrology, employing 3 full-time professional astrologers to predict the future. These three eccentrics were paid $350 a week plus expenses to apply their astrological skills to the realms of espionage and counterintelligence. Thomas provides a glimpse into the CIA astrologers' average workday. And again, I want to remind you, a lot of MK Ultra was born out of the fear that the Soviets were doing something similar to our prisoners of war, to other prisoners of war, when they were like, are they erasing their memories? What is happening? So like, now we got to do it. So again, like at this point, we're also looking into remote viewing. We're hiring people to do remote viewing. A lot of those remote viewers happen to be Scientologists. I'm not really sure what that means. People have theories. I don't really have a theory about it other than it's weird. It is weird. And another part of this book is many of these activities seem to have been benign, even humorous. In April 1972, however, Operation often took a very dark turn, plunging deep into demonology. That's a quote, deep into demonology. When Operation often shifted toward researching the devil, the person in charge of exorcisms for the Catholic Archdiocese of New York was approached by Operation participants for assistance. According to Thomas, the Monsignor flatly refused to cooperate. Good on him. When recruiting the Catholic exorcist failed, Operation often turned to Sybil Leek, a Houston sorceress who cast spells with the help of a pet jackdaw called Hotfoot Jackson. Leek helped CIA behaviorists navigate America's satanic landscape. Really quick, let's just look up jackdaw. Sorry you can't see this along with me, but for those who don't know, so it's just image in your head. A jackdaw is a species of bird, and they have a blackish crown, wings, and tail, with the rest of their plumage being paler. It's like a white, almost like a gray plumage here, and wrapping around their necks with stark black wings and a black face. They come from Asia, Europe, and Siberia. Everyone's favorite place, Siberia. But they're interesting looking. And wish we knew what kind she had. A little more research we know. But I just think that is fascinating. With the bird perched on her shoulders, Mrs. Leek gave the two very nice gentlemen from Washington a fast course on the current state of black magic in the United States. 400 covens operated by 5,000 witches and warlocks. These people were the foot soldiers of a prediction industry which supported 10,000 full-time fortune tellers and 200,000 part-timers, as well as a growing publishing business in tarot cards and factories producing a widening range of anti-Christian tokens. Satan was not only alive, but thriving in the country. Man, Gottlieb wished to weaponize Satan for the CIA. Again, Gottlieb wished to weaponize Satan for the CIA. So he was Jewish, but he wasn't practicing Jewish. I just think this is interesting in looking at him trying to weaponize Satan. If this is true, which I believe it is, having read everything I have read about Gottlieb, he was this like new age guy, and as was his wife. Now, I agree with certain ways of his life. Gottlieb was also very much about living off the grid. I think he was into raw milk, as am I. He didn't use a lot of electricity. That part is very fascinating, but him and his wife rejected, I think she was Christian and he was Jewish, and they became like more new agey, like this stuff. So now, with all that in mind, again, Gottlieb wished to weaponize Satan for the CIA. In order to do this, Dr. Gottlieb decided that the devil must be made respectable. In order to provide the devil with an air of respectability, the CIA doctor turned to an academic institution. Thomas explains, working through conduits. He, Dr. Gottlieb that is, financed a course in sorcery at the University of South Carolina. 250 students enrolled, and lessons devoted to fertility and initiation rites and raising the dead. I was going to take a little tea break there for everybody. Let you think about that. There are way more passages on this tweet We won't get into them all. Since my schedule is all thrown off, this won't be the longest episode today because I got to do dad stuff. But this has been really nagging me because I'm about to connect it. I don't know if you guys see where this is going or if you've seen it online already, but it's fascinating and it's terrifying.
Hi, it's me from the future. This was supposed to go up last night, and you would notice that right before it cut to me from the future, there was a slight edit in the video. I had to chop up this episode in order for me to send it to Alex. For whatever reason, this file just refused to send. I tried all yesterday afternoon and evening, and it just wasn't happening. So I just want you to be aware of that fact. Yesterday I had a power outage. I recorded a little later than usual. And then after I recorded, this file did not want to send. So I had to cut it in half and send it in 2 parts to Alex. But on top of that, also wanted to just add another thing to think about before we continue with what I was just talking about with Aquino, is just this idea of these covert operations to induce a narrative. So, we're talking now about these satanic funding situations, the CIA funding satanic operations and working with all types of people like necromancers, tarot card readers, remote viewers, to bring about some sort of weaponized evil, spiritual evil into this world on their behalf against us. Think about how then that kind of thing can be used for what we talked about in the beginning of this episode, the January 6th narrative, and how they can create narratives around these things. That's something we always have to be aware of, especially in post-reality, where you can't really believe anything you see on the internet ever. And we should have felt that way pre-internet, but since most of us were born in the age, into the digital age, we're always toggling back and forth through the physical world, what's left of it, the digital world, print media, and trying to make sense of things. And obviously, the powers that be know that and are trying to manipulate it. So the way they induced the J6 narrative against Trump and his voters, apply that same thing to what we're talking about now, and how they use that against the people, and they're just always experimenting with ways in which they can brainwash us at a mass scale. It's not just about, like MK Ultra was about, we can take individuals, try to brainwash them, try to turn them into super soldiers, try to turn them into Manchurian candidates. And now think about that on a mass scale, because obviously that is the evolution of it. It's not, it wouldn't always just be how can we control the individual. It's also how can we control the population, which has gotten easier for them in the digital age, but also the technology, as much as I disagree with a lot of it, is a useful tool for the dissenting voices to help subvert those false narratives. So just want you all to keep that in mind as the video continues now. Thanks again. I know I started this video by saying happy January 6th. It is now January 7th. And I was hoping to get that up last night, but here it is. Enjoy the rest of the show, and I will see you guys soon. Later.
So again, I'm going to stop saying again so much. Like, what is up with that? It's a weird new tick I have today. Must be the way they updated my AI programming. I just want to read from a little bit of the bio of Michael Aquino, so you remember exactly what we're talking about. This is a guy I showed you. He had military, all the badges, the awards, the eyebrows. He was born October 16th, 1946. He died September 1st, 2019. He was an American political scientist, military officer, and Satanist. He was the founder and high priest of the Temple of Set. Aquino was also a specialist in psychological warfare for military intelligence and an officer in the U.S. Army. Now, why? Why are we allowing that to happen? Why are we allowing it to happen? His title on his Wikipedia page is High Priest. I said that. He was an Eagle Scout, though, in his youth, and he was ROTC. He got his master's from the United States Army Reserve and his PhD in political science in 1976. We'll skip some of this. That's just career stuff, military stuff. In 1969, he joined the Church of Satan, led by Anton LaVey, and quickly rose through the ranks of the group. By 71, Aquino had been appointed Magister Caverns of the fourth degree within the church hierarchy, and was the editor of the publication The Cloven Hoof, and sat on the governing council of the Nine. His career in Satanism was paused when he went on to work in the military. He met LaVey at a screening of Rosemary's Baby. You guys read or seen that book or movie? It's a great book. I'm hesitant to say great because of the subject matter, but I think it's really good insight into how sick a lot of Hollywood is. I really recommend reading that book. It's a very hard read because of the subject matter, but I read it a few years ago in the winter. Man, it's insane. And knowing this stuff that we're talking about now, like how real this was to many people in Hollywood and in the military, going and rereading Rosemary's Baby, very scary stuff. Just dark. When LaVey gave him his business card. So LaVey gave Aquino his business card. They grew to be very close. However, conflicts arose over time between LaVey and Aquino regarding the direction of the group. The latter rejected LaVey's atheism and materialism. When he started selling positions in the Church of Satan for money, Aquino finally left the group in 1975. His history of the Church of Satan, entitled The Church of Satan, has had several editions and has been an important source for academics, though how reliable Aquino is has been questioned. And LaVey criticized him quite a bit. But after he left the Church of Satan, he started a ritual in which he asked Satan for advice on what to do next. According to him, Satan appeared to him in the summer of 1975 and revealed to him that he wanted to be called Set, a name that his worshippers in ancient Egypt are said to have used. Aquino produced a religious text, which is called the Book of Coming Forth by Night, which he claimed was revealed to him by Set in a process of automatic writing. So that's like when you are getting like a vision directly downloaded to you and you're just writing it all down without even thinking. The book proclaimed Aquino Magus of the new Eon of Set and heir to LaVey's infernal mandate. On this basis, he founded the Temple of Set, which is dedicated to the worship of Set. In contrast to LaVey's approach, this group has an occult and hermetic orientation. Aquino's orientation was strongly influenced by the work of the British occultist Aleister Crowley. Is that surprising anybody? Is this surprising anybody at all? In 1975, the Temple of Set was registered as a non-profit church in California and received a state and federal recognition and tax exemption that same year, where the baby known as Gavin Newsom was starting to be initiated into the Temple of Set. I just included that, but I feel like that's reality. Before I move on, these are the child molestation allegations. As part of the Satanic Panic, see how they're already framing it? Now, like looking back, sorry, my old chair is squeaking. Looking back now, the Satanic Panic, I think, was rooted in reality. I'm sure, kind of like how the drone situation we talked about yesterday, where there's a real issue going on up there that might be Palantir. There's also people throwing up their own individual drones and kind of taking advantage of it. Same thing with the Satanic Panic. Probably just like some people making fun of it all and wanting to get a rise out of people who really did care about it. But those people took away from the actual reality of true Satanists, which we know exist, and we know existed then, to the point that they were high up in our military helping to write books on how to perform psychological operations. Isn't this insane? Is it just me or is this insane? Anyway, in November 1986, the San Francisco police began investigating allegations of sexual abuse in connection with the Army's Child Development Center at the Presidio of San Francisco. A girl came forward in August 1987 and identified Aquino as the culprit. At least 58 out of the 100 children who had attended the daycare center showed physical and mental signs of sexual abuse, leading to a lawsuit by the parents for $60 million in damages. An investigation against Aquino was launched, but it was closed after insufficient evidence was found. Despite this, Aquino has become a fixture in some corners of conspiracy theorist communities. I wonder why. So we'll move on. This guy, The other thing, and before I move on, though, I wanted to include is on his Wikipedia page, it says he died on September 1st from a lung illness. Other sources say it was suicide. So just more discrepancy about the reality of Michael Aquino. All right. And MK often does have its own Wikipedia page, though it's sparse. But it was a covert U.S. Department of Defense program developed in conjunction with the Central Intelligence Agency sometime in the late 1960s. A partner or descendant program of MK Ultra. The goal of MK often was to test the behavioral and toxicological effects of certain drugs on animals and humans. Testing of these drugs was done on animals, prisoners at Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia, and military personnel at Edgewood Arsenal. So that's great. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? All right. Where am I going with this next? Where am I going with this next? Just want to make sure we get the right thing here. So I'm just going to pull it up so I can't find the link. I'm going to look up Michael Aquino's book. MindWar. MindWar is the name of the book. I believe he had a co-author. Who co-authored MindWar with Aquino? Here we are. Paul E. Vallely, Vallely, V-A-L-L-E-L-Y. He's a retired United States Army Major General and former senior military analyst for Fox News. He served in the Vietnam War and retired in 1991 as Deputy Commanding General. In 1980, Vallely, however you say his name, co-authored the book MindWar with Michael Aquino. In 2004, together with retired Air Force Lieutenant General Thomas McInerney, he co-authored another book, The Endgame. And this is where the whole thing I want to tie together that I said earlier I couldn't believe, but I looked it up and maybe you already know where this is going. This gentleman has served as military committee chairman for the Center for Security Policy and runs the conservative political organization Stand Up America US. Vallely was part of the leadership of Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA, and he was on the advisory board. It says was on the Wikipedia, but when I initially looked at this 2 or 3 weeks ago, he was still on their website. So that, to me, is just fascinating to see these people be a part of such big teams. And where I first saw someone talking about this after I saw a tweet that mentioned this, they were talking, I think his picture looks like his picture's gone. Unless I'm looking in the wrong place, I want to make sure. I don't see his picture anymore on here. Well, it was. Vallely was on the TPOSA website. It's not now, probably because of what's been going on the internet. But the first person I saw make a video about that connection was talking about how so much of Mind Wars had to control the masses, how to control the mind of the masses. And you think about someone in position of power advising something like as large as TPOSA with that much influence, really interesting that would be a person that they'd want around them. Because I'll tell you, I wouldn't work with that person. Anyway, it's like what I was saying yesterday. If you're gonna be friendly with like Epstein, post everything we know, post conviction, all this stuff, that says a lot about your character. And although Aquino wasn't actually convicted of anything with a child molestation, but it seems like if you look into it, it seems like you should have. And there's not, there's lots of stories like that one. Maybe I'll mention that another one in a second, but the fact alone that he was an open Satanist is enough for me to be like, I don't need to be involved with this person. I'm good. So the daycare thing that story with Aquino reminded me of in Presidio. There's that story we talked about with Destiny Resendez about a year ago, where she walked us through Beau Biden's history as what was he, Attorney General in Delaware. and we talked about the DuPont heir who molested his own child. But we also talked about that doctor, the pediatrician that Beau Biden, again, this is Joe Biden's son that passed away, who might have been a pretty good person. We're all flawed. He's not a Hunter Biden. He's not a Joe Biden. But Beau was really working to help find justice for kids who'd been hurt by evil people. And one of those major cases was a pediatrician who they uncovered molested thousands of kids at his own practice in a dungeon below the practice. I believe he videotaped it, so there was evidence. It's just disgusting. So I just can't help but think of something like that when you think about something like a daycare. Like, I know a lot of people, yesterday I also mentioned people have a hard time facing this evil. They don't want to confront it. And I said, like, we need to stare at it in its face, and we need to destroy it, right? Expose it, destroy it. And a lot of people are like, I can't, and so people hear these types of stories and they'd be like, it's a conspiracy theory. Or they just write it off. It's not that bad. Yeah, it happens, but like, it's not that bad. But it is that bad. Someone might say to me, like, it's not like the movies. And they're right. It's not like the movies. It's worse because this is reality, and it's actually far worse. It's thousands of kids at one practice in Delaware. That was just that. Like I said yesterday again, there's so many stories from the past 10 years of children being hurt, abducted, trafficked, raped. Like, give me a break. Sold into slavery. It's widespread. And it's disgusting. So I thought that was such an interesting connection with that guy, Valelli and Aquino. And why? What does that mean? But look up, if you want to see more from this book I was reading from, look up at Toxic Tiramisu, Tiramisu. And they've got a lot of pages from the book that are just insane. Okay, I'm wrong with that one part. The book is about Aquino, and I'm looking at the source now. The book that I was reading from is called Invoking the Beyond by Paul D. Collins and Philip D. Collins. And it's about what he was doing. So, well, not by Aquino. And look up MindWar too. I know some of you have told me you started reading MindWar. Look what these people are saying. They're not hiding it. They are not hiding this stuff. What else? I had something else pulled up here that I'll read a brief little tweet from. This is from Nick Hinton. Nick, Nikhintonn is the handle. He's been sharing a lot of this stuff about Aquino as well. And he had this. Aquino said the real alien invasion wouldn't be Martians with ray guns, but a parasite or virus that terraforms Earth and turns humans into something else. He also implied we'd never meet these things face to face, but communicate with them through technology. Okay, and now I'm remembering exactly how this all happened. This is going to be a good transition. Let me take a sip of my tea real quick. Let me check the time real quick. Make sure we're still recording. I hope this thing is working. Get a load of this. So keep that in mind while I do this, searching for this link. The alien invasion will be a parasite in our mind. This is from July 3rd, 2021. Okay. And it is from Futurism. And this is the title of the article. Elon Musk suggests that a brain parasite is forcing humans to create superhuman AI. Elon Musk tweeted a fascinating and frankly unsettling theory last night about how a brain parasite might be forcing all humans to create advanced AI. The Tesla CEO was responding to a story from National Geographic about how toxoplasmosis, a common parasite often found in cats, seems to be causing hyenas to be reckless around predators such as lions. In a staggering and perhaps facetious leap of logic, Musk suggested that the parasite is actually what's causing humans to create advanced artificial intelligence. Even if he's being funny, it's just a cover, because I think this dude is just as evil as the rest. Seriously. So weird. It's so weird. Toxoplasmosis, he said, infects rats, then cats, then humans who make cat videos. Musk tweeted on Friday. AI trains achieves superhuman intelligence training on internet cat videos, thus making toxoplasmosis the true arbiter of our destiny. Okay, I don't think he's really kidding, is the thing. I think he says things that sound funny, but they're rooted in some ancient knowledge. I think he really has. And I really do mean that. And for various reasons, but one being, I'll never let it go, and I'll never believe in coincidence, especially in this coincidence that Werner von Braun, another Nazi that we hired through Operation Paperclip, who built the V2 rockets for the Nazis, and we hired him to do NASA to get to the moon, wrote a book about colonizing Mars, and the government of Mars would be called the Elon. And what are the odds? What are the odds that we get an Elon who wants to colonize Mars? I mean, come on. They think we're stupid. They think we'll just be like, it's a coincidence. It's a famous name throughout the ages. Everyone knows about Elon. But toxoplasmosis, which is one of my favorite words, by the way, is a single-celled parasite that typically infects rats and mice. The parasite, scientists believe, affects the minds of rodents and causes them to lose their fear in predators such as cats and humans. These newly brave rats will approach cats, get eaten, and pass on the parasite to the cats, who then pass it on to people. A symbiotic relationship with cats, essentially. Kind of sounds like what's happening with AI. It is a predator that we invite into our homes. But does it affect humans as well? Maybe. Studies have suggested that people who test positive for toxoplasmosis can exhibit more risk-taking behavior. In fact, a study looking at almost 600 people in the Czech Republic and 370 people in Turkey found that those who tested positive for toxoplasmosis were overall more likely to experience a car crash. At the end of the day, though, it's incredibly unlikely that a brain parasite is causing humans to create superhuman AI. Sure, futurism. Sure. For one, this is obviously parasite propaganda. They're just throwing us off the parasite trail. I don't believe it for a bit. For one, not everyone has a cat. Okay. Also, there's no evidence that toxoplasmosis makes us want to create advanced computer science projects. But imagine if it is infecting our brains and it's giving us these ideas that we think are our own. And they're like, just build the robots. You need the robots. It's how we escape Earth. It's how we terraform Mars. I think Elon knows. I think Elon is a defense contractor. I think he knows. He's weird when he talks about like aliens, right? Like, you know, I have my own theory on aliens and what they are in terms of like from a biblical lens. But certainly there's something going on in the world that is supernatural. And when he's on Rogan being asked about aliens, he's very adamant that there's nothing, which might, you know, you could say it's rooted in his atheism. He wants to be God. He wants to play God. He's on record as saying he wants to create limbs for people who've lost limbs that will be better than what God made initially. But it's funny, is as I say that, I'm like, well, you have to kind of believe that God exists for you to say that. Even though he says he doesn't believe in God, I think a lot of these people do, but they believe that they have to defeat God, which they can't, obviously, because they're just mere human beings. But like Aquino, you know, he believed in God. He just worshipped Satan. He didn't worship God. He worshipped Satan, immorality, evil. So there's certainly a parasite in people's brains, and it is certainly running rampant through Silicon Valley, because those people are sick. They're sick. You're not going to change their mind. They're sick. They're sick people. Let's see what else I have here. How are we doing on time here? All right. What do I want to do? All right. We got two things quick before I wrap this up. This is from our friend of the show. You know him, you love him, you trust him. Avi Loeb, the father of 3i Atlas. He published this yesterday. If 3i Atlas is a comet, why would the CIA neither deny nor confirm the existence of records on it? So far, So far, 3i Atlas displayed a number of, this is him now, a number of unexplained features relative to familiar comets as I listed here, to another Substack article he wrote. One could have hoped that these puzzles would trigger a healthy scientific debate about the nature of 3i Atlas. Instead, the case was officially closed by NASA officials without any discussion on the puzzling nature of these anomalies. The anomalous features include the existence of a prominent anti-tail jet directed at the sun, both before and after perihelion. The geometric alignment to within 8 degrees between the rotation axis of 3i Atlas at large distances and the sunward direction, the alignment to within 5 degrees of the orbital plane of 3i Atlas with the ecliptic plane, as well as the prominence of nickel relative to iron in that gas that 3i Atlas sheds, reminiscent of industrially produced nickel alloys. Basically, he's just saying there was some strange nickel in that strange rock that is hurtling through the sky, among other things that are weird about it, that he said, that he theorized about it. On December 31st, 2025, the CIA replied to a Freedom of Information Act inquiry by John Greenwald Jr. that it can, this is a quote, neither deny nor confirm the existence or non-existence of records. That, if you ever heard a CIA quote, I mean, that is a great CIA quote. We can neither deny nor confirm the existence or non-existence of records. And he's got a picture of it here, of the answer to the FOIA request. This letter is a final response to your November 12th, 2025 I'm speaking so fast now. I'm so excited. Freedom of Information Act request seeking any assessment, reports, or communications maintained by the CIA about 3i Atlas. I just want to say real quick, November 12th to December 31st turnaround for a FOIA is insane. It doesn't usually happen that fast. Sometimes it takes 6 months to a year. Sometimes it does go quicker, but I am shocked it took that quick. The CIA says, we completed a thorough review of your request and determined that in accordance with Section 36A of Executive Order 13526, the CIA can neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence of records responsive to your request. The fact of the existence or non-existence of such records is itself currently and properly classified and is intelligence, sources, and methods information protected from disclosure by Section 6 of the CIA Act of 1949, as amended, and Section 102A IL of the National Security Act of 1947, as amended. Therefore, your request is denied pursuant to FOIA exemptions. So there you go. The CIA can neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence of 3i Atlas, which now I'm like, what's going on? Maybe we do have something. Maybe we do have something. All right. Well, last but not least, I just wanted to warn everybody, you know, it's flu season. Talk to your doctors about your vaccines. I don't do any, but if you guys are interested, there is available to you now, as of this article published on January 3rd, first of its kind fentanyl vaccine to prevent overdoses gears up for human trials. Dude, this is a crazy world. This is from the New York Post. A vaccine to protect against fentanyl's deadly effects is headed for clinical trials in humans. The vaccine, which showed positive results in studies of mice and rats, is designed to block fentanyl from entering the brain, blocking its effects and preventing overdoses. If approved, it would become the first treatment to prevent overdoses of fentanyl, which is the leading cause of a drug overdose death. Statistics show. This is different than treatments like naloxone, hope I'm saying that right, which reverse the effects after an overdose. The vaccine is designed to create antibodies against fentanyl, which keep the drug from crossing the blood-brain barrier. It contains a synthetic fragment of fentanyl attached to a protein called CRM197, along with DMLT, an immune-activating compound. The combination stimulates the immune system to produce antibodies that capture fentanyl in the bloodstream before it can reach the brain, according to the University of Houston's Colin Hale, co-founder and scientific advisor of ARMR Sciences, which licensed the vaccine. In a vaccinated individual, those anti-fentanyl antibodies are in the blood. Hale told Fox News Digital. So if they consume fentanyl, the antibodies grab onto the drug and prevent it from getting into the brain. They would feel no effects if they ingest fentanyl, absolutely none, and they would not overdose. Can you imagine these trials are like, all right, give them the fentanyl, just be ready with the needle, just be real ready. Or they give them the vaccine first, I guess, and then give them fentanyl, and then just watch and hope for the best. You remember that Prince, the great musician Prince, died from a fentanyl overdose because someone gave him what he thought was just a normal painkiller for, I think he had a surgery, and he was in terrible pain, and he didn't typically take drugs. I don't think he was a drug addict, as far as I can tell. And someone gave him a pill that looked like another type of pill, didn't know it was fentanyl, and that killed Prince. And I don't believe they ever found the person who gave him that pill. No one got in trouble. In the mice and the rat studies, the animals still had antibodies against fentanyl 6 months after the vaccination, added Hale, who is also a research associate professor of psychology. While some have questioned whether such a vaccine would indirectly encourage drug use, Hale pointed out that for vaccinated people, the drug would have no euphoric effects, so those seeking a high would not get it. The main benefit, according to Hale, is that the vaccine would reduce the potential health dangers of fentanyl. Just be careful. Just don't take fentanyl, and don't take things that people just give you randomly. I mean, this just doesn't seem like it's going to help. Am I wrong? Does this seem crazy? It's very interesting. Respiratory depression is the primary effect that induces death from this highly potent synthetic opioid. And it is bad. Fentanyl is really bad. Really, really bad. Aren't we invading Venezuela to stop this, even though not a lot of fentanyl comes from there? It does come from China, and China and Venezuela are homies. But I think maybe we should not be taking any more vaccines. But that's just me. Talk to your doctor about fentanyl, please. That's all I got for today, guys. Again, I did get some messages from people who were like, hey, did you know that this isn't live? I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I probably should have said it earlier in this episode, but now you're hearing me say it now. Another pre-record. My apologies, but here we are. But I am stoked to be here and doing this and talking to you guys. Again, thank you so much to everyone who tuned in yesterday. A lot of fun seeing you all in the chat last night, and I'll try to be there again right now, tonight. And just wish you guys all the best. Stay away from fentanyl, obviously. Read up on Satanists that are overtaking our military, because that's been happening for decades now. And hit me up with any ideas you guys have about other stories, things you've seen that I've missed. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and sharing the show. It's awesome. I really appreciate you guys still showing up despite not being live. But we're making it happen, and we're having fun as much as we can in this crazy world. And what else? I am pre-recording an interview with a friend of mine for Thursday night. That will be, I'm going to try to do half a recording of just stories and stuff like usual, and also have this interview out for Thursday night. It'll be a friend of mine who, it'll be more like just about music and his story, which I think is interesting. And he's got a song that's coming out with Kanye on Friday, the day after that will air. So that should be fun. And I'm looking forward to that. I think it's a song and a video coming out. So that's cool. And it'll be fun doing that. And other than that, that's it. Thank you guys for joining me in my dining room once again. Always a pleasure. And I will see you later. Have a great night.